Welcome, everyone, to Sports Talk Line, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. And on this episode of Battle for the Big East, we're going to review the men's and women's NCAA Final Four with Pam Chavotkin. How are you doing today, Pam?
Doing well. That's pretty good. The last name always gets people, so
Yes.
impressed.
I'm proud. Hopefully that's a sign for things to come. Um, but going back down and, looking at both the men's and women's tournament, we'll start with the women's tournament first. I kind of felt there's a lot more buzz around the women's NCAA tournament this year. It could be the absence from last year, but who would you say would be the breakout star for the women during the NCAA tournament?
Ada Barnes, who's the coach for Arizona, is somebody that absolutely sticks out to me. I mean, pulling off a tournament alone in the middle of a pandemic is just amazing to me. And the fact that, you're getting all these teams to bubble and quarantine away from their families, away from everything that they're familiar with, and kind of throw them into this very more or less uncomfortable situation. And then they kind of had the spotlight on them, right? Where there was a lot of negative press going into the amenities that they had, to ultimately getting said amenities kind of after the fact. And it kind of gave that mindset of like saying, all right, we don't have what we should be having in comparison to the men's tournament, but we're going to prove ourselves. And I know there's a lot of people watching us, and we're going to do what we've been doing all season, which is really good basketball for those that haven't watched all season. And we're just going to kind of silence the critics, and the best revenge is success in my eyes. So something that, with all of the Pac-12 teams, I think that can be said for both men's and women's this past year, has just been so impressive and kind of more or less under that radar, and the tradition that we've known is like the UConn teams, and now that Iowa that's been like really, really good. But yeah, Ada Barnes is just somebody that just is like a no BS kind of attitude. She's a younger generation of coaching. So I look at somebody like the Brenda Frieses from Maryland, who has been around for the past few years. You look at Gino Auriemma from UConn, who has been around the past. He's a staple. And you kind of just expect those teams to always be nationally ranked. I went to Tennessee, so like my history and tradition was always that Pat Summitt level of thinking. And going into what my expectations were already high. But a coach like that really kind of just breaks the mold a little bit. She was breastfeeding at 5 a.m. and was very open about it, which in this day and age is not easy to do. I think all of the women this past tournament kind of made themselves vulnerable by taking that extra step and showing, what, we deserve better. You gotta do something. We're great and we deserve better than this, and somebody has to step up. And the game, on the court absolutely was incredible. And I want to, like, the ratings for the women's tournament this year was up a significant amount, which is really great for the sport. What the women's basketball in general have done over this pandemic has really been impressive. What the WNBA did for, the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that, what they did for voting in Georgia, they really, you have to credit a lot of them, and getting their voices heard and getting people to watch the tournament be out there. Aria McDonald is another player from Arizona who is amazing. And then you have like these young blood freshmen, Caitlin Clark from Iowa, Paige Beckers from UConn. That game was like, that Sweet 16 game was unbelievable. I could not think or do anything else but watch that game. And it was like the highest level of women's basketball that they could compete with the men. Not even a question. And it was just so much fun to watch. I love the way that ESPN tackles the tournament. Holly Rowe is one of the best sideline reporters out there. And it's really a testament to how that whole tournament was run, and ESPN, I thought, did a great job.
All right. Now, you kind of mentioned Arizona, and we had an Arizona versus Stanford championship game. The scary thing about that, it proves Bill Walton was right, which kind of,
I mean, on so many levels, it's really
it's
terrifying.
scary. When the Pac-12 was making their runs, we're like, oh God, Bill Walton's right. We're never gonna hear the end of Bill Walton, but this gives them more
No.
motivation to go forward. But how would you rate the Arizona versus Stanford championship game, especially without no UConn Huskies, because the UConn women's brand, I think, is the premier brand in women's sports. First of all, how is the quality of the game? And also, how do you think the ratings were they favorable? Did UConn not being in hurt it? How do you rate those games?
I think at this point, watching that game was just it was exciting basketball. So as much as fun as it is to see a team like UConn who is at that caliber and at that level, I didn't mind it as much. I just wanted to ultimately see a really great game, and that's what we got. It also allowed not having that traditional coach and team that we're used to. It left the door open for new personalities that we could get on board with, and it's the fun of the game is being able to recognize a lot of these players and the heart and the storylines behind it that makes it exciting. And I always love to hear the after tournament stories of these storied programs that have been kind of under the radar that you don't really think about. And we always say this about the men's team with Gonzaga, actually, ironically, specifically, that we never hear about because we always listen to the UConns and the women's and the Tennessee of the women's. And with men's, you hear about like UConn and Duke and Kentucky, but without them in the tournament or without them being featured, it again paves the way for new blood. And I think we definitely got an opportunity to see that. I thought the women's final was great. The ending was such a heartbreak. I had to go back and watch it, several times. Officiating, that can be with either men's or women's. That's just
Mm-hmm.
always going to be the case. And I don't pretend to be anything closely related to, a referee. But, when I'm watching that, I'm like, wow, you're tired just watching them because anything could happen and anything, you could come back from 15 and win the game and you just don't know how it's going to go. At the end of the day, you just want to see a great game, and we got that. So I was happy about it.
Yeah, I think the Baylor women's team have a question about officiating, to say the least. But we kind of mentioned it a little bit already. Do you think the women's 2021 NCAA women's tournament helped grow the brand of women's basketball?
100%. 100%. Because, again, seeing what the WNBA had done over the past year, we have to remind ourselves that like the players that were in the NBA and the WNBA played in college, and so they are promoting their teams. And the battles and kind of the strife that the women's game went through, just overcoming adversity. I mean, if you look at the differences between the weight rooms alone, it kind of made people call them out a little bit, which I think was definitely needed by the NCAA. I think they're thinking twice in terms of the equal pay, equal opportunity movement. I think that definitely is going to help grow the game a little bit. Do I wish that it would have happened a long time ago? Yes. Do I wish that they were always with a large platform? Absolutely. But the benefit of it with these limited amount of games and opportunity with the pandemic, it kind of put them on the platform of just performance. And you really had nothing else to compare them to outside of performance. And they performed way beyond a lot of my expectations. I always knew that they were good and I always knew that that was something that I was going to watch. But I think it really opened the door to new fans, which I'm hoping are going to stick around moving forward. And again, with the personalities, it's really hard not to get excited about Ada Barnes, not excited about Ari McDonald. And then again, the freshmen coming in, they're only going to get better and they're only going to get, these coaches that are going to develop them into better players. And, sky's the limit for them. And hopefully that the opportunities and the amenities that they should have been, privy to beforehand are going to get better. And also with the exposure on the networks, they are proven now with these ratings that they can easily be on ABC instead of just ESPN2 that, was on there before. So I think the game has definitely proven themselves that they can be in that major market and be in that major time frame that, I'm excited to see what's happening in the next few years.
Speaking about being loyal and proving yourself, prove yourself as a true sports fan and hit that like and subscribe button so you can follow Sports Talk Line right now. But, Pam, you definitely bring up a great point with the ratings and everything. With the women's game, I think that they have grown so far. and I'm going to ask you this one question. This follow-up question is: do you think the women's tournament benefited from being on at the same time as the men's tournament? My reason behind this is if you want to watch college basketball and the men's game is a blowout, but you click onto another channel, and women's game is a one possession game going back and forth like a Baylor UConn. Do you think that helped the women's rating being on at the same time as the men's NCAA tournament? Or do you think the women's TV rating would be better if they were at a different time than the men's NCAA tournament?
Um, that's tough because it's hard to gauge with that kind of thing. More so because you can't really you can't predict it. You can't say, hey, let's put this on, at 4 p.m. and then the men's game, because you just don't know how the games are going to go. It could have been the complete opposite, where there could have been a one possession game for, a Sweet 16, and the other games are also close. Like, you can hope that those games are going to go well, but you can really never predict that. And I think with scheduling, you want to give each men's and women's ample time after the regular season to prepare for the tournament. I think this was a completely different situation with the pandemic. You're dealing with a lot of very limited resources, and that can make or break sometimes. But it's you want to get the tournament in too before any of the other events that come up that could take away from it, which is another reason why CBS had specifically had the tournament during this time. It always falls on Easter weekend because they want to prepare for the Masters. So they don't want to push it back a week because it's going to interfere with programming. And programming, bless their hearts, this is all predetermined way before even the regular season comes out. So you really have, not much of this team is great, let's just flex them to a different time frame. Mm-hmm. That's just not how the tournament works. You want to make sure that it's fair to all the teams that are playing in a bracket situation. So did it help that the women's game happened to be more exciting at one point? Yeah, of course. I mean, anytime there's a game that's close, you want to make sure that there's a programming alert where people are able to watch it. And I think that too is where the digital aspect of how sports is gearing toward now is really important too, because if you're blackout in some area, it's going to be difficult for you to watch. So if you have the opportunity, offer the opportunity to have people be able to watch it online or consume it in different ways, or get, Westwood One on radio to be able to listen to it, consuming that information is really, really important. So, and making sure that there's ample and adequate highlight packages, making sure that there are reporters and people that are specifically designated and camera people that are there before the Sweet 16. You get them in early, which never really was an option with the women's tournament before. Getty Images and, having an, AP be there prior to the Sweet 16, because they didn't feel that there was enough people that wanted that information. Now I think that's changed a little bit, right? And I hope moving forward that it's become more visible, that there'll be a better way and better opportunities for consumption so people can watch the game and be able to consume it that way.
Yeah. Speaking about consumption, I think one of the games which to me was a great game. I think you never had a national semifinal like this, I don't think. We've had them in the finals, we had them in the regional finals, but never in the national semifinal. And you probably already know it's the UCLA versus Gonzaga championship game that went to overtime. There were so many, from the storyline perspective. You have the number one seed that's from the weaker conference versus UCLA, who has the most national titles as an 11 seed. You have the role reversal. You also have Gonzaga going for an undefeated season. So many things. It was a back and forth game. Scruggs hits the banked in three. It looked like he knew it was going in. He was the first one to know. And to say the least, I thought it was a great game. Pam, what do you think about that Gonzaga versus UCLA national semifinal game?
It was probably one of the greatest games that I've seen ever. I mean, it really ranks up as just, again, the storylines were amazing, and you want, I had no dog in the fight, so that kind of made it even more exciting. I didn't bet on the game. I can't bet on things like that just because I go insane, freak out. But at the end of the day, and that was always my theory with any of these Final Four games, really with any of the games in general, I hate to see blowouts. The Baylor Houston game was just boring to me. Like, I like to watch basketball.
Yeah.
I don't like to have basketball on in the background while doing other things. It's just not something, especially when it comes to the tournament and it's a one and done situation. I like great basketball. That game was an unbelievable, just there's nothing, looking back on UCLA, there's nothing that they could have done better, which is just a crazy thought to see where they came from starting in the first four to where they are now. Did I hope that it was going to be a great game? Did I expect it to be that great? No. And it was just emotionally draining for, I think, both teams. What's really impressive about UCLA is that they could return, everybody could be back next year. And that makes them so dangerous. And they're kind of playing against, these health protocols. Again, they're in a bubble situation too. They're with limited resources. They're not able to do the normal things of a tournament that they would, normally be able to do. And Gonzaga, who, they're a storied program. They're always a team that has gotten into the tournament and made a far run. Always. Mark Few was always an underrated coach. He's been there for so long that this was kind of like, now what? Let's just prove ourselves. We're, undefeated. Let's keep going. But as we all know, in this tournament, it's anarchy. You cannot predict. Doesn't matter how many, statistics you have and how many box scores you're looking at, you cannot predict how a game is going to actually go.
Yeah.
And that was something that it's this UCLA team just kind of proved. And what was also cool about the national championship team is everyone was like, oh, well, Gonzaga's totally going to win, not even a brainer. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what happened? What's going Wait, how? I was so surprised that they even are even putting up nothing. And I'm like, really? Baylor's pretty good. Like, and it just became something where I'm like, don't discount, the underdog. There's always the David and Goliath type of game. Yeah. And I'm so happy for Mick Cronin that really got the opportunity to show himself on this national stage. And I knew him from Cincinnati, and it's just cool to see him develop the way he was, and to see how Scott Drew took his program, over the course. It's been so long. I can't believe it's been how many years it's been since he took over that program. It's unbelievable. 2003, I think it was, something like that. And then you've got Mark Few, who's just, a storied coach. And, as much as it stinks to not win that game, you can't knock either team for playing as great as they both did. So I thought it was enjoyable, and I was happy the way that the tournament turned out.
Yeah, I think, no, since you mentioned the words anarchy, and this is a college basketball show, by law, we have to acknowledge John Rothstein. Yes. But, I will say this. If you look in the archives, I did predict Baylor would win the national title 3 weeks ago. So awesome. I wasn't alone. There were some people who were on the Baylor bandwagon. But since we're talking about Baylor and Gonzaga, this felt like a dream matchup where you had the two best teams. They were close to playing in December. It didn't happen because of COVID. Here it is. Great. Let's see what happens. And Baylor, I felt, dominated the whole game.
Absolutely.
Now, do you think this one-sided championship game kind of diminishes the tournament as a whole?
I don't think so. Again, it, like you said, it took 4 months to even get to this point. I mean, if you want to compare the whole tournament, ultimately, when you do seeding at the very beginning, you want, the 1 versus 2, the 1 versus 1 matchups. Ideally, that's the hope, that those teams are going to be good enough to make it to that, that final level. You want the 1-to-1-to-1-to-1. And, obviously that doesn't always happen, but that is the ideal goal, that they are good enough in the regular season and in playoffs to reach that position. So in terms of, not the greatest game. Yeah. But I mean, you could say the same thing about, well, if they reach the Super Bowl and it's a blowout, does that mean that it sucks? No, it doesn't mean that. I think it just means that, like, one team just ended up playing better. And that's just, it is what it is, but you have to look at the entire archive and what that is, as a whole, as opposed to just compare it to just one game.
I also think too, you brought up Mark Few, and he's done a great job at Gonzaga. He hasn't left. Gonzaga used to be known as the school John Stockton went to. They have grown so much in Mark Few's time. But the one issue with Mark Few is he has not won that national title. So how does Mark Few not winning this national title? A lot of people thought it could have happened this year. How does that one, I guess, missing part on Mark Few's resume impact his legacy?
I mean, does it stink? Yeah. But he's still going to be for the next generation of coaches. I mean, especially with Roy Williams just retiring and, now Sean Miller's out and you're looking at the overall resume. Again, we can't compare one thing to his overall career. No coach in men's history has ever won games at a higher clip than him. I think he's like an 83% something or other. I think he's took over the program in 99 and he's just, incredible. So it's really hard to compare one loss to it. I mean, if you look at somebody like Charles Barkley, are you going to blame him for not winning a national championship in school? No, he went on to get, play in the NBA and do really, really well. And, you can't say, well, he didn't win a ring, so what good is he? You can't do that. You know what I mean? You can't really look at that as a loss to his overall career. It's just, I think he already broke barriers by being undefeated, and I think they're the only team in Division I history to win at least 30 games in 5 straight seasons, which is unheard of. That is just an unreal statistic. And you look at somebody like Boeheim, who has gotten to the Sweet 16 a gajillion times and only won one. I mean, could you say, well, he only won it once? It's just the same thing of like, well, if he wins it, then what's the next thing you're going to try to, compare him to? Well, he didn't win 2. You have to look at the entire archive of his career, and his career has been really, really successful over the last few years. And it's just a winning percentage that continues to grow. And, this doesn't hurt him. Does he not have, a championship? Yes. But is it going to hurt him in recruiting? Not even close. If I was, wanting my son to play, I'd want for him to be playing for Mark Few, for Mick Cronin, any of those that are going to instill and make that player into a better player by the time that they leave. Whether it's after 1 year, you hope it's for more than one. You don't want those one and dones anymore. But with the transfer portal as big as it was this season, he retained his guys and he kept it as solid as he could, and you just got to credit him that. So
yeah, I definitely think for Gonzaga, it's coming because they're starting to now get those top recruits that they haven't gotten before. And also, I do believe with Mark Few, he's one of only 3 coaches, I think, with 15 plus years coaching experience and not have a losing record. I believe it's him, it's Bill Self at Kansas, and it's actually Mike Anderson at St. John's. I think it used to be Roy Williams, but Roy Williams had a losing season last year, and he was off the list. So that's all we got for this week's episode of Battle for the Big East. Pam, can you tell everyone where we can find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ReddusFoximus, ReddusFoximus, and that's Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Pam, and everyone at home, listen like you play with intensity.